I want to thank John and the Hispanic Business Council of Dulles Chamber for inviting me to speak to you tonight. I'm going to take a few minutes to share some thoughts on what we have going on with the National American Latino Museum project. But before I say that, I want to say just a point of personal privilege. For me, this is like coming home. This is like coming home because I was the chairman of this chamber back a long time ago, probably 12, 13 years ago now. I was so proud to be the first Latino to chair a mainstream chamber of commerce in the history of Virginia. Yeah, you can applaud that, that's okay. Go ahead, applaud that. You know what? You know why you can applaud that? Because we are making a difference. As Hispanic business owners in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we are making a difference every single day. That's right. And even though this is, Rebecca said that I was originally from New York City, I am from a small town called Brooklyn. You may have heard of it. But for the last 28 years or so, this has been my home, the Washington, D.C. region. And you may know D.C. as a city of politics and power plays and monuments and so forth, but D.C. is also a city of museums. Did you know that there are about 70 museums in the D.C. region? 70. Big museums, small museums, art galleries, history museums, and so forth. But the cream of the crop has always been the 17 museums in the Smithsonian Institution, those 17 national museums. Included among them are two of the newer ones, the National Museum of the American Indian and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is now one of the top visited museums in the world. What you won't see, unfortunately, is an American Latino Museum. And that's a shame. Because when we tell people about this initiative, one of the first things they usually tell me is that they're surprised that there isn't already an existing Latino museum. Yeah. And they're right, because there ought to be one. There ought to be a museum on the National Mall to celebrate and commemorate the over 500 years of Latino contributions to the building, the shaping, the defending of this nation. And that's why our mission is to illuminate the American story for the benefit of everyone, for a more complete and accurate telling of American history. So you all have seen those movies where you go back in the past and you change something in the past and it alters your present. You've seen those movies, right? Back to the Future and so forth. Well, imagine, if you will, United States of America without roughly the lower half and most of the West. Well, we don't have to, because for over 500 years, Latinos have been founding and settling communities across most of the U.S. territory. You know, in fact, we're told in elementary school that the American story begins in 1607, when the British arrived in Jamestown, Virginia, to establish the first permanent British settlement. Well, unfortunately, that's, as far as I'm concerned, historically accurate. As far as I'm concerned, the American story really begins 114 years before that, on Columbus's second voyage to the world in 1493, when he arrives on the shores of what is now U.S. territory in Puerto Rico. Right? So the American story doesn't go from Virginia to the north and to the south. Real expansion goes from the Caribbean up to Florida, onto Alabama and Mississippi, Texas and California, as far north as Wyoming. So by the time the British get to Jamestown, 1607, it's already been a bunch of Latinos saying, "Bienvenidos, what took you so long?" In fact, I tell my friends from Alabama, I tell them, you're basically a bunch of Latinos several generations removed, right? Imagine if General Washington had not won the War of Independence. Well, we don't have to, because Bernardo de Galvez, Spanish general and governor of Cuban and Louisiana Territory, along with over 11,000 Spanish troops, was there to stem the advance of the British from the south, fighting in battles in Pensacola, Florida, and Mobile, Alabama, allowing General Washington to win the War of Independence. Imagine if we didn't have the first admiral in the United States Navy during the Civil War, uttering those immortal words, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." We don't have to, because the first admiral of the United States Navy was David Farragut, or more accurately pronounced, David Farragut, whose biological father was actually a Spanish soldier who fought alongside Galvez in the Revolutionary War. Imagine if we didn't have the 500,000 Latino troops during World War II fighting every theater of that war, making a difference, and allowing us to defeat the Axis powers. Imagine the Korean conflict without the exploits of the U.S. Army's 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinqueneers of Puerto Rico, setting the gold standard for the bravery of a combat unit. Imagine going downtown to D.C., to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and not seeing the thousands and thousands of Hispanic surnames etched on that wall. Imagine not having the young Latinas and Latinos fighting and sacrificing on our behalf in the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq, or the 61 Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients. My friends, as an Air Force veteran, I'm here to tell you, Latinos take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty. Imagine Major League Baseball, America's pastime, without the strong cadre of Latino players on virtually every single team. That era of Latinos in baseball was ushered in by one of my personal guests, Roberto Clemente, number 21, and we ought to get that number back, who ushered in that era of Latinos in baseball, in spite of the fact that he had to face discrimination, not only because he was Latino, but also because he was Black. Imagine a television sitcom today where there's only one camera, or maybe two. We don't have to, because innovator Desi Arnaz, in his famous TV show, I Love Lucy, came up with the idea of a 3-camera shot in a live studio audience. And speaking of television, imagine if we didn't have that wonderful actress, Linda Jean Córdoba Carter, also known as Linda Carter, who was television's Wonder Woman in the 1970s, who changed the face of strong women on television. Imagine if we still had to deal with school segregation in this country. Well, we don't have to, fortunately, because Felicitas Mendez, Puerto Rican woman, who moved to California and married a Mexican immigrant. And when she tried to send her 3 kids to school in California in the 1940s, they wouldn't let those kids go to school in the whites-only school because their skin was too dark and because they had Hispanic surnames. So she filed a lawsuit against that school district in the famous case Mendez v. Westminster. And that case was used as the template by Thurgood Marshall to take on Brown v. Board of Education, which ended school segregation in this country. Imagine, my friends, today, the absence of Latino workers in our farms and in our factories, in our hotels and in our hospitals, in our restaurants and in our research laboratories, in our sanitation departments, and in our Supreme Court of the United States. In our music studios and in our movie sets, where we don't have to imagine that, because for over 500 years we've been relying on Latinos to fight our wars and to run our businesses, to tend our fields and to mend our wounds, to teach our kids, patrol our streets, write our laws, and to share the word of God. My friends, contrary to what some might have you believe, Latinos are not a recent patch being sewn onto the tapestry of America. We are an essential foundational thread woven into the very fabric of America. It's for these reasons that we need an American Latino Museum on the National Mall as part of the Smithsonian Institution so we can celebrate and commemorate those 500 years of contributions. And that's not all. We also need to enlighten the public about the wonderful complexity of our community today. The incredible mosaic that our community is today. We know the numbers. We are 60 million people. We are 18% of the population. We're 25% of the population under the age of 18. We are $2 trillion in purchasing power. We are a very diverse community too. We are Afro-Latinos. We are Asian Latinos. We are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. We are mulattoes and mestizos and everything in between. We're not a race. We're a culture. You know, I did Ancestry DNA recently. I found out that I'm a genetic sancocho. Genetics too. I am 50% Iberian. I am Native American. I'm African. I'm Western European. But that's us. We are Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. We are a community made of some very foundational, fundamental shared values around family and faith and freedom and opportunity and optimism and pride and passion. And those are the qualities most in need in our country today. And lastly, we also have a responsibility, we have a duty to inspire future generations. We know that the Census Bureau tells us that by the year 2060, Latinos will make up about 30% of the population. So if we hope to remain a strong, thriving, and vibrant nation, that segment of the population needs to feel acknowledged, engaged, and invested in our future. The good news is that we are closer than we have ever been to making this dream a reality. This all started back in 1994, 26 years ago, when the Smithsonian itself organized a task force to see how they were doing in terms of portraying Latino stories in their exhibit. Well, that task force did its job. They did their research, and they came back with a report. The title they chose for that report was Willful Neglect. Not only was the Smithsonian doing a poor job, as if they were doing it on purpose. Among the 10 recommendations in the Willful Neglect report was the creation of an American Latino Museum. Well, fast forward several years. In 2008, Congress passed a bill to create a commission to study the feasibility of creating that museum. That bill was signed into law by President Bush. I was one of the people appointed to that 23-member commission, along with people like Stepan and Ivo Longoria, and we came together as a family. And in 2011, we delivered a report to Congress and President Obama saying 3 basic things. Number 1, there was a clear and pressing need for this museum. Number 2, it really should be part of the Smithsonian Institution. Number 3, it really ought to be on the National Mall, our nation's backyard. That same year was when we first introduced a bill to authorize the Smithsonian to create this museum, 2011. Well, several Congresses later and several iterations of that bill later, there's a 501c3 Friends of group that was formed back in 2008. I became the chairman of that group. And fortunately, this year, on the 27th of July, the House of Representatives passed the American Latino Museum bill unanimously on a voice vote after having garnered 295 bipartisan co-sponsors. You can applaud that right now. Fortunately, the job's not done. We allowed ourselves about a minute to celebrate, but that bill then got sent over to the Senate. At that moment, on the 27th of July, we had 29 co-sponsors for the Senate companion. Today, we now have 45 co-sponsors, and we are working every day to get more co-sponsors and convince Senate leadership to allow that bill to move forward. And you can help. You can go to AmericanLatinoMuseum.org, and you can find a way to be able to contact those senators that still aren't co-sponsor of the bill and tell them that they need to co-sponsor this bill. And I'll close with this. I've been involved in this initiative for 12, 13 years. Because for me, it's a labor of love. It's a passion project. It's a legacy initiative that, as I said earlier, we are about family. This is for my family. Because one day I want to be able to walk into this museum with my 2 sons and my future eventual grandchildren. And I also have a vision of a young Latina that's born today, right here in Herndon. And on her 6th grade field trip, she can go to DC and she can marvel at the monuments, and she can visit Capitol Hill, and she can go to the national museums, including the American Latino Museum, and she can see all these stories that I've been talking about, and she can leave that museum proud, not only to be a Latina, but proud to be an American. I want to thank you all so much, and God bless you all.
First of all, I wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, buenas noches. And I hope that you and your families are safe during these difficult times of COVID-19. I want to thank you, the Dallas Regional Chamber of Commerce, for the invitation to speak at this 18th annual Hispanic Business Reception event. I am very humble and honored for this invitation. I just wanted to tell a little bit about my personal story as an immigrant. As Casey mentions, I migrated from Guatemala in 1985. It was a difficult situation. For my family, we have some death threats in Guatemala, and we have to leave in a rush. I came with my wife and 2 young daughters. We left everything behind. I arrived to this country without speaking any English. I brought my medical title with me. That was all I have. It was very difficult. First, I had to learn English. I have to work different jobs, not even related to my medical field. One of my jobs was I was a school driver in New York, in Bronx. I have some other jobs as well. My wife also, she worked for Kentucky Fried Chicken. And after 2 years, I was able to pass the foreign medical examination requirements. And I was accepted in a residency program and graduate in Buffalo, New York. And then I practiced OBGYN in upstate New York in a small town near Lake Ontario called Oswego, New York, for 6 years. And in 1997, I came to the great state of Virginia. And with my family, I have at that time 3 daughters, and we have been here since. And we are very happy to be Virginians. And we are very thankful for this country for the opportunity to give us to be able to succeed. 2020 has been a very difficult year for all of us due to COVID-19 pandemic. This virus is highly contagious. It's of the family of coronavirus. And arrived in January 20, the first case was detected in the United States. Now we are several months into the pandemic, and the virus is still spreading in the communities around the country. As today, we have 6.96 million infections reported. Our nation 2 days ago just passed a sober milestone with over 200,000 deaths. But we cannot forget that our community, the Latino community, has been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. In Virginia, the population of Latinos is 10%, and we have 45% of the cases, 35% of the hospitalizations, and 11% of deaths. We know that health disparities long existed in the community, even before the pandemic, but the sudden appearance of this novel virus has highlighted these disparities in a major way. Some of the reasons why it's affecting our community is that a lot of our community members are considered to be essential workers with jobs that cannot pause. They are more likely to live in crowded housing, more likely to use public transportation, more likely to lack resources to follow isolation and quarantine themselves. And also they have less access to health care. Nearly 46% of foreign-born Latinos do not have health insurance in Virginia. I just want to give you some numbers, and I would like to share a screen if possible. I would like to share some information, share a screen if it's possible. I am not able to do it, but it's okay.
You should be able to do it. You can do it.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, here we are. As today, Virginia, we have 142,590 cases, hospitalizations 10,718, and deaths 3,089. Fortunately, the positivity rate in Virginia has come down. Now we are at 5.5%. We used to have a 1 point close to 20%. In Fairfax County, where we have most of the cases, where the Latino population has been mostly affected, the population of Latinos in Fairfax County is 16.2, and we have at one point was close to 64% of the coronavirus cases. Fortunately, we have come down. We are now at 47.4 with a positivity rate of 4%. This is just to show how the virus started. And the first case that we have in Fairfax County was March the 7th. As I mentioned before, we have steady increase in the cases in the months of April and May. At that time, May and June, Latinos, they have 14 times more cases than any other white population. But now the number of cases in the Latinos in Fairfax County is coming down to only 4 times. So this is a very good news. Here are the districts that we have the most cases, and they are reflected being areas who are very crowded housing. You can see here is the blue line is the Latino. We can see how it has come down, and now we are in I would say in pretty good shape. Here again, it's just a similar graphic. In my hospital, I wanted to mention Loudoun County. Loudoun County has 6,720 cases, and to date they have 22 cases. The positivity rate is still a little bit high, 6.8, but as long as it stays under 7%, I think it's okay. In my hospital, Innova Health System, across all the hospitals, they have treated 3,841 patients, and unfortunately, they have reported 392 deaths. 3,483 patients have been discharged to date. As a physician, I wanted to remind that COVID-19 is highly contagious, twice as the flu, and 5 to 35% deadlier than the flu. We continue to have community spread, and therefore we must continue taking all the precautions to control the virus. We have to use the mask, particularly when we are indoors, but also outdoors. If there is no possibility of having the physical distance of 6 feet, it is recommended to use even outdoor the mask. The mask has to be, at least if it's a mask that is surgical or KN95, but can be made home, it has to be at least 2 layers of material. 3 layers is actually the best. I recommend continue the social distancing, the washing hands, and the community mitigation is I think Virginians are following the instructions, and we have seen that progress has been made. On September 17, the governor of Virginia signed the proclamation of the Hispanic Latino Heritage Month, encouraging Virginians to celebrate virtually, as we are doing right now. And we are in an indoor place, of course, social distancing with less people, as people are right now in the hotel. Latinos in Virginia represent the 15th largest ethnic minority in the United States, so we have a large Latino community. And I am very proud to serve in the Governor's Virginia Latino Advisory Board since 2015, and I have been serving in the Healthcare Committee. The board was established in 2005, and to advise the governor on issues of concern affecting the health, economic, professional, cultural, and educational prosperity of the Latino community in Virginia. This year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the recommendations have been focused on COVID-19. Among the recommendations that we have in the Healthcare Committee that are being drafted and will be soon given to the governor for consideration are as follows, some of them. To create a Latino-focused leadership team in the Virginia Department of Health to provide strategic advice on mitigation of COVID-19 in Latino communities, based on the following. goals, metrics, trends in COVID-19, testing, infections, hospitalization, recovery, deaths, case investigations, tracing of contacts, quarantines, and isolation for Latinos living in Virginia. Recruitment and hiring of bilingual and bicultural staff by region or locality that serving case investigations, contact tracing, and resource navigation. We are trying to encourage that the communities that have more Latinos have more contact tracers, that they have the cultural competence so they can better outreach the community. And I think this is what we have seen, the number of cases dropping down as the number of contact tracer they are getting higher at the present time. We also we are working with to work with the administration staff, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and community partners to create a master strategy. Combat the COVID-19 epidemic that includes lowering infection and transmission through testing, contact tracing, quarantine, and isolation, and other effective measures. Guarantee that there will be no immigration staff checks in COVID-19, testing or treatment. Y something muy important is to secure personal protective equipment, PPE, for Virginia residents in a strategic marketplace. Also, we would like to see more healthcare professionals of Latino descent. As we know, we cannot address health disparity when we increase the number of professionals. In medicine, the population of Latinos is 10% and only 4% of physicians are of Latino or Hispanic origin. And I just would like to mention this very important application. It's called COVID-Wise. It can be downloaded in any smartphone like an iPhone or Samsung. It's very important. At the present time, more than 500,000 people have registered. The phone will notify whether or not you have been in contact with somebody who has been tested positive, and will let you know what to do. You need to contact, the health department to get a test. So this is very important. The most people sign for COVID-Wise. I think it's going to be an additional help. And I just would like to finish with some words of wisdom on the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside yourself, something to repair tears in your community, something to make life a little better for people less fortunate than you. That is what I think a meaningful life is, living not for oneself, but for one's community. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Buenas noches.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rimola. We really appreciate your presentation.